Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome back to the Lindsay Martin Ellis Experience. I have the pleasure of having Rachael Jayne Groover with us in the house today. Would you like to say hello to our beloved community?
Hello, beloved community. So glad that I get to be here.
Yes, and I will let you share a little bit more about yourself, but I'll just share briefly. You're an international speaker and best-selling author, most well known for your book, Powerful and Feminine, and your new book that we're going to talk quite a bit about today, Unshakable Inner Peace, Get Off the Mental and Emotional Rollercoaster for Good. So you are the founder and CEO of the Awaken School. You left your career as a singer in Australia, moved to the US. You are also a speaker, teacher, and author, just like myself. So we have a lot of synchronicities, and I can't wait to open up the dialogue today. So, yeah, I would love to hear in your words how you support humanity during this time.
Yeah, I mean, I help people be unshakable, and so much is shaking right now, outward and inward. So many things are changing, and so many belief systems are changing, and your friends' belief systems are changing as well as yours, and all of that's going on. And I think your community's very much into growth and into stepping forward into something new. And that's usually shaky, like we haven't gone there. And all of my work is to help people have that not only inner peace, unshakable, which is the spiritual awakening journey, but to have the nervous system not be so freaked out when it's trying something new, or when it's on stage, or they got to shoot a video for their new service work or whatever, like how to have an unshakable presence. And most of our clients have got this connection between really wanting personal growth, spiritual growth, and their business growth equally. So how do you be unshakable when you're trying to build a 6, 7, multi 7-figure business? It's
Yeah.
not easy,
Yeah.
right? So how do you stay in that place truly, joyfully, when everything's moving around you?
Mm. I mean, our messaging is very similar, but there's various. This is why I love bringing other people onto the show because there's so many different pathways to get there. And I think a lot of times in the spiritual world and the self-help world, right, especially as you and I are both authors ourselves, right? It's like I remember being that person where I would read something in a book and it would be like, I need to apply it exactly this way to my life, right? Like taking that thing and that's part of the journey. But what I found is like the malleability and just like the experimentation and trying things on and like having that openness to just try and see what happens and the grace to just keep going when you fall off. I found that that's what's allowed me to really shine in this area as well. And it wasn't always like this. So I'm curious, have you always felt that you've had this unshakable presence, or was it over time through your own lived
Oh,
experience?
it's definitely over time, for sure, for sure. You mentioned that I was a singer in Australia. That was my full-time gig for a long time, but it was a long time ago now. And I had to learn how to not feel like I was going to throw up on stage and actually perform and be present and be in the moment. But it was really scary. If anyone's ever tried to perform, it's that, and there's judgment that might come to you. You're putting yourself out there in a big way. So I had to go through all of that. And then I finally kind of got to a place like, okay, I'm feeling unshakable in that. I finished my career singing to 40,000 people in a huge arena, and, moved over. And then when I moved to America, I really was in love with Oprah when she was having all of her new people on, Jan Levan Sant and Gary Zukov and all those people. I was growing up in that era, and I just thought, I really want to not just entertain people, but to support them on their personal and spiritual journey. But then I've got to be a coach or a business owner, and now I've got to learn that. And like, that did not go well for many years for me. That wasn't a smooth transition into, oh, you just follow your dream and the money will come. I was completely not understanding how to do business and really coming up against my biggest fear, which was fear of judgment, fear of, other people talking behind my back or trying to pull me down or that kind of thing. And when you move into doing your own work, now you're trying to be unshakable in that way. So I had to learn how to be unshakable in business and in my message and on videos and all that kind of thing. And then the business, it just got, we grew after not understanding how to do it. And then we grew pretty quickly. Now I have, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 full-timers on the team. It's growing. That brings a whole nother level of ability to be unshakable. And it still continues. This year has been the most stressful of work years for me for the last decade by easily, because we're opening our retreat center and we're renovating an old church that is huge and has got a lot of moving parts, and there's the finances of that. And so it's been very stressful, but to have this ability to really understand what the true essence of this vehicle is, then it doesn't have to get to me, which would have only a few years ago, it would have been really, really, really tough.
Oh, I love that. I had someone recently on the podcast. She's from Poland. Her name's Ria Sokol, and she also was a singer over in Poland and became an international speaker. So I love the soul journeys of the paths that we choose, right? To have the practice and the initiations of like, okay, how do I be on stage in front of people? How do I overcome judgment? And it's like we all have these training grounds that we choose in preparation. And so much of my journey.
Absolutely. I share on my about page, my bio, it's kind of like starts with, I didn't know leaving school whether I wanted to save the world or entertain it.
She said a similar thing.
It's and so then that's perfect. The archetype of her and I are, that's similar of I was so into psychology early on. I thought I wanted to be a social worker. That's kind of where the saving the world was. And I realized, I don't want to take people, kids out of homes that are in abusive situations, or deal with, the situations that social workers do. But it was kind of, like you said, pointing to this is what you're here to do. It's part psychology and the holding space and the personal development and entertaining everybody at the same time.
So she does a lot of poetry. She does a lot of self-expression. She still sings. I'm curious to know, do you incorporate any of your singing or self-expression in your work now?
We do a little bit. So I met my husband pretty quickly after I moved to America. That was the hugest gift of my life. And he's a bass player, very, very good bass player. So, and I play guitar, a little bit of piano, but mostly sing. And so we do some at our bigger events, but no one really knows about it. So it's really cool to see people go, what? Because my voice is quite well trained. So it's not, I've seen other people be like, oh, I'm going to sing a song, and it was lovely, but I know how to belt out a tune. So it's just so fun to be like, see people's shock. And then I put it aside because I'm not really that person anymore. It sounds like it's still very much a part of her. It's kind of there because it makes people feel good. I really love the strategic moments at the mic with someone who's been struggling with something for a long, long time, even if they've been on a personal and spiritual development path, or those moments when you can share an embodiment practice that will change the signal that they're sending. They're trying to figure out, why do they keep getting that same response from men or women or clients or whatever, and to change that really quick. Those are the moments when I'm working with someone that's like lights me up.
And I love this, that I have like these kind of two of you of recent podcast interviewees, because it goes to show, right? Like only we individually know our path, right? Like that path absolutely served you in a multitude of ways. Perhaps it brought you and your husband together. And again, all of the tools and resources of what that took to be able to be successful in that way. And for her, it still very much is a part of her work. And so when people are listening, right, it's that same piece of not
Yep.
comparing. And just because, right, like the surrender of letting something go, I think it would be important to talk about that, because when, especially as a business owner myself, I just let you know that I'm pregnant. Most of the people that are tuning in know by now, because I've shared quite a bit of it on my journey on here, but I've let go of so much because it's just required right now. And the,
Yes.
moving and
Yes.
and and my group programs, like right now I'm only doing private coaching, and it feels like flexibility is so important.
Yes.
And that gnosis of like, and the surrendering of, maybe I will never do group work again, I don't know. you know not being so attached to, just because I created this thing doesn't mean I have to hold on to it forever. So I think it would be supportive to speak into that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a season to everything, isn't there? For me, it was COVID, the 2020 to 2022. I felt like I got a break, a holiday in a way. And because I was on the road 50% of the time, it was a lot, 50% of the time, not in your own bed. And I loved it in that moment. But then I also love being home and starting a veggie garden and, starting all the projects that we have here at the home, because I'm a homebody as well. And also feeling the ramp up as the retreat center starts to come alive, this desire for more larger retreats and the ability to have that. So I think there's absolutely a season to it. You point that non-attachment, I mean, for everything, is really the gateway to joy and to peace. And if we've built something like a business or like a program or like a particular relationship, that stacks on the stakes of like having to give that up. And actually, it was a big theme in the book, Unshakable Inner Peace, because prior to that, I had written Powerful and Feminine, I'd written Divine Breadcrumbs. So it was all kind of more personal development, helping women come into their femininity, their feminine power, what that meant. And I'm sitting down to write this book, not knowing quite what it was, but thinking it would be about how to awaken your impact, because we had done so well in our business and people were asking that. But what came through was a conversation with a very clear voice around all my traps that I was in that wasn't allowing a full spiritual awakening or the non-identification with the ego to happen. And it was all about enlightenment and what that meant. And as I was writing it, I wrote it in four-day period that just downloaded. I was so scared of this being published and me having this very raw conversation about my issues and this voice coaching me through it. And so I see, like, whoever reads it will see that exactly what you're saying, the dynamic of I have to let go of what I thought I was. And I have to be willing for my whole entire career to come crumbling down. And that's hard when you've built something. And I had built something and I was scared of losing that. And I was scared of losing identity. I was scared of being boring. Like, what if I just come into the Eckhart Tolle of inner peace? What, will I just lose my personality? All that you're going to read in the book, but it's about what you said,
Yeah.
letting go of all the layers. It's a must.
Oh, I love that. And, you know, so much of what you're sharing is about, as we evolve, right? It's not like the hard things go away. And I talk about so much of this too. And actually my signature program is called the Awakened Feminine Circle, right? So there's so many synchronicities in our messaging, right? I would imagine, right? Like we're born into this masculine paradigm, and then through our awakening, we're like, wait a second, there's this whole other, you know, like there's this whole inner essence that we're not even tapping into. And, that's a whole journey within itself.
Mm-hmm.
But, what you're talking about, I think so much of what we're modeled is like, we think that once we get to this point and we've attained something, that we're all of a sudden enlightened, or there, once we have this amount of money, or we have this relationship, or we have this home, and then we get there and we're like, I want something else, or I don't feel any different, or why do I still feel the same, or why do I still not have the confidence, or whatever it is. And obviously this is a lot of your book is this messaging right here is right. What a beautiful gift. I mean, I just got full body chills when you were talking about what you're going to bring to this, old church, which I also think is fun, that you're kind of like reinventing this
Yes.
temple in a way that
An
then
old patriarchal Baptist church from a grumpy bum pastor is kind of what it is, and making it into something extraordinarily sacred and beautiful for everyone. Exactly.
Yeah. So I think let's dive into maybe just some tools and some support and really letting people ground into, like, it's not that it ever stops. It's that, right? Like, there's going to be challenge, right? You're doing something you've never done before, right? You have this brick and mortar, like you're so connected to it. There's more people, right? I used to be an engineer. I know in construction, things come up along the way that you don't foresee.
Right.
So I would love your insight on how can you help simplify the understanding for people to like really surrender into, this is evolution. This is what we're here to do. It doesn't mean that the challenge goes away, but it's what we do with that challenge that creates the unshakable inner peace. And, I want to hear it. I want to hear it. I want to hear
Yeah. Yeah.
it.
And I think, when I hear the idea of the challenge doesn't go away, it's many challenges do and some don't. So let me just share from my experience what challenges didn't and what challenges have gone away for good
Beautiful.
through the spiritual awakening process, which is never ending. But prior to writing this book, I would have kind of described myself as a very high functioning, healthy, emotionally mature, evolved soul who had been on a personal and spiritual development for many decades, been meditating for a long time, all that kind of thing, but knowing that I was not experiencing what Eckhart Tolle was talking from the guru chair. Like, I knew that there was something different, or whoever your spiritual teacher is that can explain the process of non-identification with the ego. Does that make sense, those words, for your clients and people listening?
Yeah. Yeah, but again, I love like the more we can simplify it, I think it really supports people, because I think, like there's a lot of, just like with anything, your words start to get used often, and then
Yes.
it almost like,
Lingo and jargon and
yeah, and the meaning can kind of, there's like sometimes can be dissonance, or it kind of loses
yes.
its
So
like
let me put it in
potency.
experiences. Even though this was happening, I felt very happy. I was probably by far the happiest person I know, very successful, but in a way that wasn't stressing me out. So all of that was great. But if I was to sit and just sit with the moment for 24 hours, my mind wouldn't have been still. my emotions wouldn't have been still. Like, certain things would just start rolling. And so it's that piece that doesn't move, and that's the experience. So I knew that was okay. And
I love that.
I
Piece
I
that doesn't
want
move.
that. Yeah, like we know that. Have you listening? I'm talking to the listeners here, but have you had the experience of just stillness? Like, you're looking at the sun, you're looking at or looking at a horizon. Yeah, we've had that experience, but they weren't stringing together days on end, weeks on end, all of that. And I'd realized that I had made up the belief that this wasn't possible this lifetime. Like, it's going to take many lifetimes, and I've got to go through all these things, and this would be great, I'm working toward it. And it was kind of a jolt of like, no, this is actually way more possible for people than they realize. They just don't have the map. And I didn't have the map to go from relatively happy human to this piece that doesn't move. And so this has occurred in my life over the the book was written 6 years ago now, and it was over this period. So it was a while ago, but it's been long enough to know that my experience now after this awakening is very different to what it was before. And so going back to your question of the challenges, which ones don't move, the challenges that don't change are the external things of money and people that you need to deal with, and time constraints, the constraints of the human realm. But the things that have changed is I don't have anyone in my life that is problematic to me. I don't have my old mind going, you're not good enough, or you're not this, or be careful, you're probably going to lose everything here. Like all of that, those challenges of that were probably my biggest challenges. They're not there. I sit and they're not there, which is crazy to me because I had all of that. The challenges of anxiety or depression, or I didn't ever have real depression, but that low level depression, it's gone. So a lot of those things that people are struggling with will go, but the human structure of day-to-day living, the kids are going to scream at some point, you've got to work with that, is still going to be there. But that's, I mean, if everything else is happy and joyful and still, then who cares if the challenges are there? They're just there.
Yeah. I love how you differentiate that, because it's funny, like it's the same for me. And I don't even like those aren't even challenges anymore for me. So that's where I love like the differential between, there are people who still have that inner challenge, right? That inner turmoil, and I don't experience that anymore. And so for me, it's like, what do I do with the external challenge? And I know so much of your messaging and your work is, right, it's like, I think I saw online, it was like inner peace, outer purpose, right? It's like, it's the, right, it's that, can we connect with everything happening around us and then connect? That's something I do almost daily, is like, and now connect with what's happening inside of me, and noticing the sometimes subtle differences, sometimes vast differences. Yes. And it becomes so easy to not to just detach, right? But not disassociate, but to just be like, okay, I'm here. I know who I am. I know how to show up in love. I know how to move through this experience. I know how to ask for what I want. I know how to put one foot in front of the other. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful tool. So what would you say would be like the first place to start for someone who's like, I don't even know how to move through these inner challenges?
Well, if they really don't know how to deal with the inner challenges, I think the best thing that I have learned and teach, like you do, is the embodiment work of being able to still the system enough to come back to presence. Because if you're not present in your vertical core, you're not present in receptivity, then your mind's just going. It's this everything I can give you will just be a mindset skill that will work for a couple of minutes or days, and then it will go back, right? You've got to change your energy field, because your energy field will change your nervous system. Your nervous system will change your thinking, and thinking will change your behavior. So go right back to what is your energy field doing. And so a simple thing that you can do is, am I in a receptive energetic field place right now? Or am I in more of a giving or got to do something place right now? And if you're listening, you can just do that with your hand. I mean, just for a moment, sense your hand, one hand actually, not the other, and be in a very receptive place in that hand. Like you are just receiving all the love, the abundance, the amazingness of this universe through your hand. And you're just becoming more and more and more receptive every moment. And notice what happens when you just be receptive. And then you can go with the other hand. I've got to give, I've got to make something, I've got to create something, I've got to manifest something, and the giving and what that does. And to me, and you can tell me what you experience, Lindsay, but to me, receptivity does still it expands things. I go into spaciousness when I am in receptivity, and I go into more thinking mode and strategic mode when I'm in the active. And I need both. I know I'm a very strategic person around the things that I want to do, but prior to writing this book, I was strategy a lot of the time first, not after intuition. I mean, I'd get downloads, the intuition, like, yeah, all of that was good. But then I'd be moving into strategy pretty quick and not allowing the receptivity to fully anchor in my system. And so you could do that. And then now I'm coming back into my body. And then you can also notice, am I a shrinker with my energy field? Am I a diffuser with my energy? Or am I a non-container with my energy? And shrinkers, that's what I am. I'll tend to shrink this big, beautiful bioenergetic field, light globe, whatever you call your individual space. I'd make it tight and I'd make it, and then my mind would start going, and other people diffuse. They don't feel like there's any edge to their boundary. And that creates issues of getting pulled into what everybody else wants. And what do I want? And the non-containment of always kind of being a bit of a spiller. And so simple things like that people might or may not have heard about, you might have heard about, but haven't trained the energy system to stay in an expansive, contained, receptive place. And when that takes hold, it sends a signal to the brain. There's nothing to be doubtful about, fearful about, versus going to another mindset workshop. I'm all for mindset, but it's really a Band-Aid, right? It's really a Band-Aid for just the moment, trying to get over and manifest the next thing. But the greatest manifestation, I think, of all is to be non-resistant to whatever's going on in the moment, always. That's like home run, as far as what we're trying to do here.
Totally. Well, I used to be a diffuser. I used to, right, the people pleasing, right? Just no boundary, just, just wanting to give and wanting to fix and just make myself available to anyone and everything. And so, yeah, but again, like just that simple practice, I can feel it now, right? Because I've attuned my body to feeling, right? Just that simple, subtle practice of like, oh yeah, it just feels so good here, right? Like just the word receptivity and just holding my hand out and just waiting and feeling into what visceral experiences emerge. You're like, oh yeah, I know, I remember, And for me, it's almost like the action is just a byproduct of that. So it's more like, again, with all of my science and physics background, it's like the ricochet, right? It's just like, okay, I surrender, I receive, I fall more deeply into myself. And as a, reaction of cause and effect, I want to give. I have the capacity and the availability to serve. And again, so work feels different, challenge, right? This is all external, right? Work feels different, labor feels different. Like as I'm moving into this motherhood journey, my relationship with all of that has shifted. And I used to call myself an embodiment coach. And now I'm like, no, everything comes back to the body. And I think it would be fun to kind of talk about this because, right, I think a lot of times, again, in the self-help world, we start with the mind, right? Because the mind is usually the thing that's driving us crazy, right? The 70,000 on average thoughts a day. But again, if we're not grounded in our bodies and if we're not connected and we're disassociated and we're avoiding and we're numbing, which is so much of what we're pulled into as a collective, it's impossible to find this unshakable inner peace that you speak of. So what's some support that you can give people in this modern world where we lose sight of that ancient wisdom and that ability to just be able to be with ourselves, right? And just to start to practice what it's like to, instead of scrolling, right? How you used to talk about, gosh, just being with myself for 24 hours, right? Most people can't even do that for 10 minutes nowadays, right? Because of all the distractions. So yeah, I would love just your insights on what's going on with the world in that constant pulling of our centeredness 24/7, very much by design in a lot of ways, and how people can just kind of start to practice, because it does take a willingness, right? It does take claiming and declaring, I'm okay, I'm going to do this.
Exactly. And training.
Right.
And training. We are needing to train new habits. And it's really the spiritual paradox is I'm not my body, but the doorway to realizing I'm not my body is to be in my body.
Ding, ding, ding.
Right. And so that is important because you cannot be in a receptive mode if you're not in your body. And receptivity is, if I have one word to describe the portal, or what's required in the portal from going to happy human that really doesn't have inner turmoil, that is doing well and has a good sense of self, to unshakable inner peace that happens when you know you're not that self. I am not Rachael Jayne. I'm not Lindsay, who I thought I was. That portal is receptivity, heightened receptivity. So anyone who's struggling can go to the moments of receptivity as best as they can. And I held it for many, 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 many days on end, which kind of pulled me through that portal to see what that was different to this. Now, that said, when you ask the question, you're asking, well, what if someone's struggling with even 10 minutes? What I find to be really important on the journey of training and practicing and all of that, which again is the spiritual paradox, you train to let go of all the methods. Right?
Exactly. To transcend the structure and the methodologies.
Exactly. But you can't just go to the non-structure and the non-methodology, because then you don't have the ability to stay home in yourself when the shit's hitting the fan, all that kind of stuff. So what's really important, I think, is to know where you are on the journey with no judgment, no like, oh, someone's ahead, someone's behind. I'm not saying that, but to know where you personally are on the journey. And so I had the humility to know, I know something has not kind of clicked in yet. I don't know what it is there, but we take it all the way back to teenagehood, or when someone starts their journey. We start with surviving our life. Like pretty much everyone's just trying to survive teenagehood, 20s. You know, some people are still like they're surviving their life and they're in survival mode. And so if you know that you're in survival mode most of the time, then own that and go, that's where I am, and know what the portal is to the next thing. And the next thing to me is going from surviving to finding, right? I need to find myself. Where am I? You know, in a sense of self. Where are my boundaries? What do I want? Who am I? You know, those kinds of things. Because when you find who you are, the things you love to do, the things that bring you joy, then you can stabilize that and you won't be in surviving mode, because you can be in the joy of who you are. So then you're okay, I found myself. And then what is through the next portal is I don't just find myself. I don't just find what I love. I now can create. I know that I can create my life. And so then that gets really exciting, because I haven't just found the boundaries and I haven't just found the joy in that. I know how to manifest through this vehicle all the things that I want. And so that was my last 10 years journey, becoming a really, 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 really powerful manifester of everything, right? Because I'd found myself. But then, as you said earlier, the creation, just because I live here on 35 acres in a beautiful, huge home and got the great team and the great this and the great that and the great husband, doesn't mean that mind stops and that emotional thing underneath stops. And so I was stuck in that. I found myself and I know how to create. What's next? And it was going from I create my life to I receive my life. And I knew that intellectually. I've had many, many experiences like you of receiving and what that does, receiving my life, receiving the next divine breadcrumb. But I really hadn't let go enough to be always receiving my life. And so that was my next piece. And once I was in the receiving it, it pulled me through to the I am experience. That would be the best way I could say it right now, at least, is I am life. I'm not receiving life. I'm not finding myself. I am life. And so once there is an experience through this earth suit, that there is nothing else except this, no mind can hold on to anything. It just can't hold on. So know where you are, or where you mostly are on that spectrum, and just kind of be like, what's my next thing? What's my next thing? Because so much in the spiritual circles, and I'm sure you see it, Lindsay, everyone and their dog thinks they, because they've gone through some experiences, that they can help everybody else, but they're looking at through their own lens. And so this is the next thing, or even business coaches do this, this is your next thing because it's through their lens. And that's just very reductionistic. It's like, oh, just do this. This is a very complex thing. You're dealing with your psychology and your body and your belief systems and all of that. So just be humble, know where you're at, see the next thing, get those tools. Lindsay has plenty of them. I have plenty of them at the awakenschool.com or in the book. But I would put a caveat, mostly for the book, it's people who are closer to what we're having this conversation. They're not people who are fully struggling. They've found themselves and they're realizing they're creators,
Right.
but they're also realizing there's something more ahead.
Yeah. And I mean, that's people who tune into this
You're
podcast.
correct. Exactly.
No, they know what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah.
But I do think it is supportive, right? Because just a lot of the times, even with our family members or those around us, most of the time, like, yes, we surround ourselves with people that are on this path, but the majority of the collective are in that space. And so I think it's just supportive to continue to remember where we came from, remember where the majority of humanity is at. But I love the way you broke it down. So the way that I heard it was surviving, finding, creating, receiving. Is that right?
And I am.
And then the I am. And I love that. And you know what I love about it most is that it was through your own journey that you were like, oh, I've arrived. And then you're like, wait a second. You go through your experience, you learn, right? And then you're like, wait, no, there's more. and the awareness piece is so powerful around, again, like, this journey, this soul journey in human form is not linear. And so to truly detach from the comparison of how perfect our soul knows exactly what we chose when we signed up, for coming to this experience. And even the way that you articulated it with where I'm at in my life, like, so much transition. And I know I'm in a time of revelation, and everything is changing. My entire life this time next year, new environment, new community, new service work, new motherhood journey, right? Like, everything is changing.
Yeah.
And I've never actually had that happen before, where every element of my life will be completely different. And just the way that you so eloquently discuss, right, creation versus receiving, I'm going to take with me now in a new way. So I want to thank you for sharing it in that way, because it is supportive. And I would say I'm very comfortable with the receiving, but it's just an elevated version of that now that is being asked to be emerged through my essence during this time.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
So I would love to know, as we'll talk about the Awaken School, I think it would be fun to talk about that. And then we can talk about the ways that people can receive your new book and the ways people can connect with you. But what do you define awakening as?
Yeah, so there's different levels of it, right? Again, not being reductionistic, that it's awakening personally and psychologically is very different to awakening spiritually. it's very different to awakening your impact in the world. So I separate them pretty quickly. And so awakening psychologically is knowing my mental habit, my emotional habit, my defense mechanism, my primary ones, being able to see when it's operating, which is usually all the time. It's just, am I identifying with that? It goes beyond just, belief structures. All of that is good. Oh, I'm realizing this is not working in my life because I believe this and all of that. But it's, true awakening is being able to sit, like I was in a meeting this morning with 4 construction workers and my husband and talking over everything. And I'm sitting there present and aware and there and enjoying the conversation and having one eye on my mental habit of attention. My mental habit, I don't know if you know the Enneagram, but I'm an Enneagram type 4. So the mental habit is on how am I looking? What's the image? And so it's going, in the background, and I'm like sitting, watching that and watching everything, and nothing's happening, right? Where before I would have been that. I would have followed that attention and done that. So that's psychologically. Awakening spiritually to me means you have the experience that you are not the person that you thought you were. You're not a person. And it's beyond that you're even an individual soul. There is true infinite that is streaming through every energy center. And that's your experience pretty much moment to moment. And awakening your impact is very much skills, right? Skills of messaging, skills of communication, skills of marketing, skills of sales, and no matter how awakened someone is psychologically and spiritually, it doesn't mean they're going to have a 7-figure or more business. So to me, awakening your impact is awakening the heart to how you want to serve and what your purpose is, and being able to communicate that in a way that's less about you and more about them, and continuing that journey on the, sales funnel down that path. And we could probably choose many other, awakening from your embodiment. That's a different thing. I know a lot of people who are very, very awakened energetically and through their, their energy centers, but psychologically is a little lower. I know I've worked with people who have got a very high level of spiritual awakening that is felt and experienced, but as soon as they're in a trigger point, they're quite the asshole, if I can say. They're really in their shadow very quickly, and that's the psychological. So I think that what we're living in right now to go to the next level is really seeing that wider, more integral way. Ken Wilber talks about it, is fantastic. It's this integral mode of reaching the next level of consciousness, which is all areas of development all at the same time, where I think we've come out of a place where we've had spiritual teachers who sleep with their students, and we have, people who are very psychologically, there, but not living their dream in their career or their business, and it's all coming together, and that it supports it.
I love that. Yeah, like it's not integrated. And I think that's what we do as humans. We compartmentalize and we put things in boxes, and that makes a lot of sense to me, right? Because we are a whole person, right? And so it's that same piece of that. It's like that individuated, I am that individuated extension of one source consciousness, right?
Exactly.
And with that, it's multifaceted and it's extremely complex in a lot of ways. So I love the way you broke that down.
And when you see it like that, then you'll be able to solve the problems that are going on, those external challenges, a lot quicker. Because I don't know how many times I've heard one of our clients, one of our business clients who have contracted for us to help their business side is, oh, I think I'm not, there's something blocking me to manifest this thing. And I'm like, no, you just don't understand marketing, right? They think if I just get good at being receptive, somehow their copy is going to be awesome. And so, but it just keeps happening. And so,
Right.
listeners, how are you doing that? How are you asking the wrong question or going, oh, I just need to be doing more of this and then this will happen? How are you doing that?
Right.
Right. For me, it was around money. It was like, oh, if I just become awakened,
Mm.
the money's going to flow. Because that's what,
Right.
Abraham Hicks tells me, just be in the receptive mode and it's going to flow. Well, not so much. It was
Yeah.
the combination of all of those things and being in a receptive place through all of those. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, and I love the groundedness of that, because I think, especially in the spiritual world, which is why I rebranded the podcast, is, it's like there's spiritual leaders that are flying away, right? That aren't connected to their bodies, that aren't connected to what it means to incarnate in this lifetime, in this experience, to live, to work, to be in relationship, to grow. And so I love the way that you break it down so that people understand, right? It's like, no, we're missing the point, right? It's not just receptivity. We're sitting here and we do nothing. Like, I love being in action when I'm in that receptive place, and I love experiencing all of it. And I think it's kind of like that same piece where it's almost like a cop out, right? It's like, oh, it's like, I want to skip this step. Like, I don't want to feel that thing. Like, this is the really challenging thing for me. So I'm going to pretend that it's this thing over here, when really I just get
exactly.
to go deep within that
I want to
thing.
hug my comfort zone so much.
Yes.
Let's just meditate a little more and it will
Yes.
finally, resolve.
Meditated away, right? So I love this conversation. So beautiful. So many nuggets that I received. So, yes, how can people, obviously, we'll put everything in the show notes, but if you want to let people know what else you've got going on, obviously, you have your new book, and you have, is it theawakenschool.com, and
Yeah.
any other places that people can find you and connect?
I think that's the great place to go. The Awakened School. It's got the ED at the end, and anyone can sign up to be a free member. We do a ton of free classes, events, master classes all throughout the year on different topics, and you can kind of come into the thing that really juices you up, or the season that you're in, and gain support there. And then once people come in and do some things with us, they're like, oh, I might want to come out to Colorado for an event, or I might want to do some coaching or something like that. But there's plenty that's free. And I'm really passionate about this book because it's actually the first of three in a trilogy around that 2-year period of what was happening. And it's a breakdown, a very raw, honest, transparent breakdown of the awakening process while it was happening.
Mhm.
And I think because of that, it's easier for the people who've read it, easier to kind of get it versus esoteric
Yes.
spiritual concepts out there. And that, the questions I had, I was asking and receiving. It was like, oh my gosh. And so I'm really excited about that. And it will be on the awakenschool.com. It's coming out very soon. And so when you read this, you listen to this, you'll probably see it, or on Amazon or any of those good places.
I can't wait to get my hands on it. And that's been so much of my journey with the podcast, is that exposure, and like how much of that the vulnerability and what it takes to
Right.
expose yourself. And I do believe that people feel that in a different way, and it becomes more practical and applicable to
Yes.
people's lives. So I just want to thank you for being courageous enough, even though I know you moved through, like, I don't want to share this,
I
that
went kicking
you,
and screaming. Yep.
yeah, and that's part of the journey too,
It
right?
is.
Sometimes we go, and right, it sounds like it came through in 4 days, and
Yeah.
like, sometimes, again, it's you getting out of your own way to be of service, and I
Yeah.
really do want to thank you for sharing in that way, so deeply and so profoundly.
My pleasure. And thank you, Lindsay, for all that you're doing for everyone. You're holding a lot of space for yourself, but the space that you're holding for your community is huge.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want it any other way.
I know.
All right. Well, all the ways to connect with Rachael Jayne in the show notes below, and everything that she shared. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Rachael Jayne, for your beautiful insights and for your wisdom. And we'll catch you next week for another episode. Much love.